Bonjour, my name is David DeVere. I'm a wine educator and traveler, and you're watching Savvy Nomad TV, the Eau de Vie edition. Today, we're talking Tawny Port. What is Tawny Port? Why do you want to know about it? Why you should enjoy it? Why you should drink it? And we're going to compare two Tawnies, a $15 Tawny with a $40 Tawny in this very fancy plywood box. And also, I want to talk about how Tawny Port might be just the best pairing for a Valentine's Day gift. All right, let's get started. Okay, if you want to follow along with me and taste a Tawny Port while I taste a Tawny Port, you'll need, well, some Tawny Port. I bought these two at Costco. You can see the previous introductory video about these two ports. This was what they had at Costco. I was going to do a ruby versus a tawny, but frankly, they only had two tawnies, so two tawnies it is. And that's kind of how it goes with port. It's a little bit hard to find. If you can go to a really well-appointed liquor store, you'll find multiple versions of port, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Anyway, if you want to taste along, you'll need a Tawny Port. You'll also need a tasting card. This tasting card is available at the link in the description from my website. You can download this, and in the flyout card or the link in the description, you will find a video on how to use the tasting card. It's a little bit of science and a little bit of preference, and the tasting card allows you to come up with a 100-point score number. All right, two wine glasses, two full-size wine glasses. These are not port glasses, they're regular old wine glasses. These little guys are port glasses, or you could have little glasses like this, which I quite adore. They're really very nice. The reason port glasses are generally smaller is because port is so condensed in its flavor and higher in alcohol. It's really a dessert wine. So generally, instead of pouring 5 ounces of port, which would be quite a lot, you generally pour 2 ounces of port. So a smaller port glass is what usually is required, but we are going to use regular full-size wine glasses so we can really capture the aroma. But if you're drinking port to enjoy it, not to learn about it or grade it, then I would suggest a smaller glass. Okay, a temperature probe might be useful if you want to see how warm or cold your port is. 55 degrees is the magic number for all wines. Port can take a little bit higher temperature, into the 60s, but you certainly don't want it in a 70 or 80 degree. That would be really disgusting. A bottle opener may be required, probably for this one. It's got a cork. This has probably got a cap and a pen. All right, let's talk about port. Now, port is cleverly named port after Portugal. It's really an export product. Export product. That's not a pun. I didn't mean it like that. What happened was the British, a thirsty group of people, were always looking for new things to drink. Well, this, during the age of discovery, happened that they stumbled upon the idea that you could fortify wine. Well, why would you want to fortify wine? And what does that even mean? Well, if you've got a sailing ship and you're taking your sailing ship from the coast of England down to Spain, Portugal, then to Madeira, and then through the trade winds over to the Caribbean, picking up all the stuff that they make over there, and then taking the Gulf Stream back to England, you might have need for something to drink on that journey. If you had stopped in France and picked up a bottle of wine, it would get sloshed around, heated, and abused, and it wouldn't really make it. But if you add brandy to your wine, oh, now you're talking. Now that wine is stable, it will last for a long time, you can open the bottle, drink part of it, put the cork back in, stick it back on your sea cabinet, and off you go. You are on your way to sea. You've got something nice and delicious. Plus, it's sweet. Haha. So in the time when sugar wasn't actually very common, anything that added sweetness to anything was really desired. So in the 1690s, the 1700s, and all the way through the 1700s into the 1800s, and even to this century, port production in Portugal is predominantly dominated by old established English trading houses. So what they discovered was that if you add brandy to wine during the fermentation process, you can stop the fermentation because the extra brandy basically kills all the yeasts from doing their job of converting the sugar to alcohol. So now you've retained that residual sugar, and wine grapes are particularly sweet when it comes to when you first taste them. They are just sweet bombs. They're not like table grapes, which actually have quite a bit of acidity in them to make them more palatable. Wine grapes are just loaded with sugar. If you start the fermentation and then stop that with alcohol, you're keeping that sugar. You keep this big body, this really sweet wine. So the English decided to do that. It stabilized it for travel and it made it sweet, which was two things that they wanted. The region they chose to grow these grapes in is called the Douro River. It's way up in northern Portugal, and it's up at the end or toward the middle of this big river. Now, to get the wine from the growing area down to the port where you could load it on a ship, you needed to put it on a river barge. The river barges were loaded with large barrels, barriques of oak, and then they shipped down to a warehouse where they sat for a while, and eventually somebody came and bought it and hauled it off somewhere, back to England or over to the colonies, or maybe they just drank it right there in Oporto. So the capital city there is called Oporto. This is in Portugal. Ta-da! Port. And so that's how port started. It's a British beverage, and it's a fortified wine. It's wine made in a traditional style, and then they add brandy to it, and it is fortified with that brandy. Gives it about a 20% alcohol, where most wines really don't get above 15 before the yeast dies. Okay, so that's the background of Portugal. Let's talk about the tawny, ruby, and other styles of port. When you go to the liquor store, you have the options of buying a couple different styles of port. There are two main styles. There's ruby port and tawny port. Tawny port is what we're going to taste here in a minute. Ruby port is young port. It's not aged particularly long, a few years, and tawny port is aged much longer. It is a long-aged wine, and ruby and tawny really tell you the color. The ruby port is ruby in color. It's bright. It's a bright red, nice looking, fresh port. And tawny port is more brown. Now all wine, which remember port is just fortified wine, all wine goes to the same color. Reds and whites all turn to brown as they age. So tawny is a brown aged wine. What's the difference between the two? The main difference between the two is that the ruby port will have more fresh fruit characteristics, raspberries, cherries, fresh plum, and the tawny port will have more matured aroma characteristics, more vanilla, more cedar, more leather, more cocoa, those sort of aromas. Those are the two major styles. Now, since ruby is only a young style, it sits off by itself. They break tawny down into a few other different types. You can have reserve tawny, which is what we've got here. You can have 20-year-old tawny. You can have 10-year-old tawny. You can have a thing called LBV, late bottled vintage. And then you can have vintage. So what is vintage? Let's work our way back up the list. Vintage is a port all from one time. So it's one particular year, a good year, and it's just a declared thing by the producers. Like they say, today is a vintage year, and so everybody makes a 2022, and it's all the wine from 2022 in that bottle. So there you go. Boom, you can buy that, and in 20 years, when your kid grows up and is 21, you can share that with them. And that's how long a vintage port probably needs. It could even go longer. Now, late bottled vintage means that they went around to all the vintage ports that they had laying around in the barrels, and they blended them together, and they made a style of vintage port. So late bottled vintage doesn't mean vintage as in you can age it for a long time. It means vintage as in I've prepared this for you. You should drink it now. If you try to age a late bottled vintage port, you will get a really kind of oversaturated and a little bit blandish port because it shouldn't have aged any longer. It's prepared and perfect right when you buy an LBV port. Okay, that's the difference between vintage and LBV. Now you've got 20 year. This is simply just working up. It's just like Scotch. It's blending different years together. So 20 year is the average. You can get 10 year, 20 year, 40 year. You get the idea. Reserve is just ports from multiple years that are pretty good but not good enough to be vintage. So there you go. And then if you just buy a regular old tawny, you've got something that lasted probably 20 months in a barrel versus a ruby, which may only have 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, whatever. It's up to the producer. Those are the types of ports. Let's talk briefly about the types of grapes. Now, all ports are blends, and in Portugal they are less particular about how they blend it. In fact, often they just say it's this particular field's blend. So it could be a farm's blend. This area over here that Joaquim has, man, it makes great port. Just harvest that and ferment it and add some stuff in, and off you go. That's the field blend. We don't really know what the grapes are. That's how they've done it in Portugal for hundreds of years. And if it works, don't fix it. If a plant dies from that field, they just take the dead plant out, they put a new one in, and voila. But of those fields, there are particular grapes that are grown in Portugal that like it in the Douro River. Those grapes are usually listed on a tech sheet that you can get from the producer. Links to the two different tech sheets for these two different wines are in the description below, but just let me read you some of the ports, or sorry, some of the grapes. Touriga Nacional, Touriga Franca, Tinta Roriz, Tinta Barroca, Tinta Cal. These are grapes that you're just not going to see anywhere else generally in port. Now they are making still red wines from the Douro. They are still not as good as port, so you can find Portuguese red wine with these grapes in it, and it's a blend, and these are really specific to this part of Portugal. So there's the grapes. Okay, let's get to tasting. I'm going to start with the cheaper wine. This is $15. Now, when you grade wine, obviously, if you've purchased the wine, usually I can tell. Usually there's a tear-off tag on this. This one doesn't. Okay, so I'm going to cut up from the bottom. When you grade wine, you know how much you paid for it. So it's not like it's blind. And honestly, we're all affected by price. So, just keep that in mind. If this wine shows up and is really amazing for $15, and you love it, well, maybe you should give it a good score because you love it and you think it's good value. If the other wine is $40 and it's only slightly as good or even worse than this, then we're assessing the value of the wine. It's not as good a value. Okay, here we are. All Portuguese ports have this interesting label over the top. It's just a paper thing, and as I thought, it's a cap. Ta-da! All right. On my tasting card, I have filled out the top. So I've got the name, the varietals, the region, and how much it's aged in oak. The tech sheet told me that. It was aged for an average of 7 years. So we've got 7-year-old Tawny Port in here. Now let's pour ourselves some. Oh man, that is a nice looking color. And let's look at the color. It is light brown. Oh, it looks great. Okay, so in here, I'm going to go brown, and pale. Okay, aromas. What are we going to look for? Again, cocoa, leather, cedar, maybe some plum, some really saturated fruit, even apricot. Okay, let's see if we get that. You can smell the sweetness on the nose, and port is very distinctive. It smells hot. I can smell the alcohol. Oh, I didn't test the temperature. Just for fun, let's see what this is at. 60 degrees, so it's not over warm. It's aromatic. It's sweet. It smells candied, a little bit caramely. So I'm going to write caramel, but hot. I can smell the alcohol. So I'm going to give it a 7. I don't want to have to smell the alcohol, but I think I'm going to in the other one also. Okay, now this should be very sweet. Yeah, that's sweet. Not very, but it's sweet. Now the body. This is full-bodied. Boy, it's coating the mouth. Very nice. The acidity. It should be in there at a high enough level that it counteracts or balances out a cloyingness of the sweetness. My mouth is watering. I can definitely taste the acidity. So I'm going to go smooth, and I'm going to give it a score of, man, the acidity is great, 9. Balance. This is the play between the acid, the alcohol, the sugars, and the tannins. Because even though it's a sweet wine and the tannins are not pronounced because of the sweetness, it's still going to have a tannin. And I want all those things to be perfectly in balance. And this is nicely balanced. I'm going to give it a 9. Complexity. This is the flavors I get after tasting the wine. I get a real strong candied apple, caramel. It's not over the top, but it's definitely there. I'm going to give it a 6. And how long is the finish? If it's a long finish, good score. It's a great finish. I'm going to give it a 9. Okay, let's move on to the other one. I'm going to put this one aside. And this one comes in a box. Not exactly sure how I'm supposed to get this out of here. It looks fairly secure. I think I gotta go get a tool. I'll be right back. These are things I generally don't have around when I try to open a wine bottle. But I don't know how to get this out of here, so I'm gonna give it a little knock there. That didn't do anything. Oh dear. Clever packaging. Oh, jeez. I don't know. I don't want to break the bottle. Oh, maybe I can push it out by the bottom. Huh. Yes, I can. Come on. I never had to work so hard. Oh, okay. I'm not sure. I hope that I didn't spend 20 extra bucks just for the packaging. Put those down there. Okay. So, cut this off. I think this has probably got a cap also, and probably not a cork. Nope, it has a cork. Okay, so my first idea was correct. Back in the Downton Abbey times, your butler would decant your port for you, and they would hold a candle here, and they would pour it like that, and they would watch for the sediment to come out of the start to come out the bottle, and then they would stop. This would leave a vitamin-rich sediment at the bottom of the bottle for the staff to drink later. And I think there's actually a Downton Abbey episode where the butler's doing that. What's his name? Can't remember. Okay. That came out nice. Now, this is a 20-year-old tawny, so it's a blend of 20-year-old grapes, or 20-year-old tawny ports, and it's been, the average age of those is 20 years. Oh yeah, look, that's very interesting. The color is quite paler compared to our first one. Let's see, I'll pour a little more in the glass here and you can see if you can see that. This is our 20, this is our Reserve, so look at the color difference. Is that noticeable on camera? It's really noticeable here. Okay, back over there you go. So, I'm going to go gold or amber in color and pale. Now that makes sense because as a wine ages, it is losing its color. It's losing its extraction. Okay, let's give this a smell. It's less aromatic to begin with. It's less alcoholic. It doesn't have the burn. There we go. It's starting to open up. I'm getting candied notes. It's definitely like a fruit candy or a fruit gummy. It's subtle. It's soft. It smells really nice. Again, it's caramel and fruit, and I'll give it a 7 too. Let's keep these two aromas on the same pairing, I guess. Okay, now I'm going to taste it. Dry or sweet? It's dry. You know what? I need to adjust the aroma smell score because if I gave the last one a 7 and it had a high alcohol smell, this doesn't. So let's go and give that an 8. I'm going to change that. Okay. Dry or sweet? It's dry. The body is full-bodied. The acidity. It's nice. It's like the other one. It's smooth. It's there. It's yummy. Yeah, it's good. It's 9. The balance. Do I notice anything out of balance here? No. It's good. 9. Complexity. It's more subtle. It's not actually as complex as the previous wine. That acidity now is dancing on my tongue. It's just lovely. Gosh, this is a really nice wine, and I'm starting to get all those aromas of complexity, but it's slightly less complex. It might be a little tight in the bottle. So I'll give it a 7. And then finish and length. Nice finish. Long length. Definitely a 9. Okay, now I'm going to do my math. Okay, here are our final scores for our 2 tawny ports. The $15 Dona Antonia is 90 points. That's how I scored it. I'm going to list it here for each subcategory. And the Pocas $40 bottle of port, I scored a 92. Here are its scores for the category. That 2-point difference doesn't really equal out for $25. Either the Pocas is worth 92 and that's $40, and the Dona Antonia is actually the value. That's what might be going on. The Pocas is a 92-point wine worth 40 bucks. The Dona Antonia should probably cost more. So that's the value. It's a good wine at 90 points. For 15 bucks, you can't go wrong. Now, if you're sharing either one of these wines with your sweetie, they're not going to know the difference. Nobody's going to be able to tell that this was 40 and this was 15, so either one of these is a good buy, but this is the value. Valentine's Day. Let's talk about that just for a second before we wrap it up. Why does Valentine's Day and port go together? Because, my friends, you can screw this up. If you buy champagne and you pair that with a box of chocolates, that doesn't go together. Champagne goes with French fries, potato chips, tater tots, and if you need an aphrodisiac, oysters, okay? However, some people are put off by oysters, so be careful. But port and chocolate, a marriage made in heaven. Well, a date made in heaven. Let's face it, it's Valentine's Day. Maybe you're just dating, or maybe you're trying to make up for something. I don't know what you're doing. But port and chocolate, they go together. That's why a port is a good Valentine's Day pairing if you want to buy your sweetie something. So, plus port is 20% alcohol. Alcohol lowers inhibitions. You get my point. Love is in the air. Okay, that's it for this week. Next week, we're going to do Chardonnay. I'm going to go shopping at Costco. We're going to buy 2 Chardonnays, an unoaked and an oaked Chardonnay. And then the week after that, we'll taste it. If you've enjoyed this class, please leave me a comment down below. Let me know if there's something I need to improve on or if there's something else you would like to see. I hope to continue these classes for the future. Who knows how long we'll do this, but I'm having fun. If you're having fun, then we'll do it. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing. That really helps me out. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers so that those ads that you see at the beginning of the video, I can make a few pennies off of too. I need 1,000 subscribers to do that. So please do consider subscribing. Now, finally, before I say goodbye, I'm going to go get Sarah and we're going to have her taste these blind. She doesn't know which one's the more expensive one, and let's see whether she can tell us what her preference is. Will she note the value wine? Will she prefer that over the more expensive one? Let's find out.
Hello. So I'm to taste these and then tell which I prefer. But I have to do all the steps. Lighter, darker. The lighter one has a little bit more of an alcohol smell, but also just more smell in general. This one smells smoother. Well, now that I swirled, I can smell it, excuse me, a little bit more, and a little bit more of the alcohol. Well, I'll just go ahead and try. Clearly, I need something to soothe my throat. Yum. That was terrible. Don't drink it. Okay. Now I feel like I'm smelling a little bit of oak from this second one, the darker one. They're both so good.
Which one do you prefer?
I don't know. Can I just keep sniffing?
No, we have to end the video.
Okay, one more taste of each one. This one seems a little fruitier. Boy, it's hard to go back and forth so quickly. I feel like the darker one might be the older one, so I feel like I should say I like that one better, but I think I like the lighter one better. But it might be because it reminds me of vermouth, which I really love. So, I don't know, but they were both quite delicious.
Okay, well,
Thank you.
the answer is
Yeah.
the lighter one is the more expensive one.
Oh, no wonder I like it so much better.
Good job, you got good taste.
I do. Thanks.
Okay, well, there you go, the real world example of somebody tasting the ports and determining which one they like. In fact, you can see Sarah took the lighter one with her. It's not even on the table for me anymore. But you can also see how my sweetie reacted to the port. So I'm telling you, port's a good gift for Valentine's Day. I hope you enjoyed this class, and I hope to see you next week when we shop for Chardonnay. Until then, I say à tout à l'heure and cheers.